Thank you, Gary. And thank you, Paul, for doing all the AV work here to make this possible. And so I'm very much honored to talk to your group here of very distinguished pilots, and it's always interesting listening to all your stories. Now, like Gary mentioned here, this has to do with Air Force F-51 airplane that crashed in Carmel Valley in 1953. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk about the crash itself, and then I'll go into detail on the pilot who actually flew the airplane. So the pilot who flew the airplane was First Lieutenant John Maxey, assigned to the 21st Fighter Bomber Group out of George. And everybody probably here knows where that airbase is. And on February 6, 1953, Maxey and his flight were sent up to Castle for a live fire demonstration at Fort Ord. And little known that Maxey actually started having problems. And his problems started with a weak battery, and he started the engine on the battery, and it just clicked over, just barely starting the engine. And so that was the first indication of some problems that he had coming. He had to run the engine up to 1,500 RPM so that it kicked in the generator so that he could get on the radio and talk. And at that time, hindsight, he should have dispatched, but he did dispatch with his flight. And so then they launched their flight to Fort Ord, and just before a couple minutes before they got to Fort Ord, his generator failed. And so then he lost his radio and his gun sight. He had to use hand signals to communicate with his flight lead. Get out of your way here. And on his first runs there, he was unable to drop his bombs or fire his rockets. But one bomb hung up in its rack, and on his last run there, he couldn't fire his rockets, and he tried to fire his rockets by his mechanical device, but he couldn't budge the mechanical device. And so the loss of his generator, and I can talk about this a little later, but that was involved in his coolant system. And that probably overpressured his coolant system, and the seals actually failed on the coolant system. So Maxey left for the formation unescorted and headed west over Monterey Bay, so that his plan was to go back to George, the ocean route. And when he just got a little bit south of Monterey, he had condensation coming out of his exhaust stacks, and then he knew he had a little more of a problem here than he thought. And so it kept getting white puffs out of the exhaust stacks, and just south of Monterey, and heavy smoke and popping of the engine. He knew then that he had to head inland and bail out of the airplane. And so he really then knew that he either had an engine fire or very close to an engine fire. And so there was no limited options that he had with live ordnance on. He couldn't go back to Castle, and he couldn't land at the Naval Air Station, which is now Monterey Airport. And so he turned inland, and he had to, just south of Monterey, most of the pilots here who know that you'd have to ascend over the Santa Lucia Mountains to get over them. And so that's what he did. He had his engine temperature indicator noted that he was way over temp. It was pegged. There was smoking from his engine, and at that time he was readying himself to bail out of the airplane. And so this is the pretty close as to what I can figure out what his bailout route was. Coming from Fort Ord, he went out over Monterey Bay and then south and headed inland and over the Santa Lucia Mountains, and eventually ended up there in Carmel Valley in the Garza's Canyon area where he actually bailed out. And so most of you guys would know his procedure that he went through. He slowed just to above stall and let the nose drop a little bit, and I think he probably went into a slight bank. And he jettisoned the canopy, and then, made sure he was separated from the airplane first, of course. And then he jumped out and landed, got off the trailing edge of the right wing. And he immediately started tumbling. And he pulled the ripcord, and later on in the debrief, he said that the shock of the parachute really was a lot more than he thought. When the parachute opened, the shroud lines got wrapped around his right ankle and severely twisted his right leg. And he almost blacked out, but he did get the shroud lines off of his ankle. And during his descent, it was very turbulent above the elevation of the top of the Santa Lucias. Wild oscillating of his parachute back and forth, and which finally, when he got below the level of the Santa Lucias, he got into calm air so that he had a chance to really figure out where he was going to land. And so he did that, and about a couple hundred feet, he saw that he was headed for a telephone line and a big oak tree, so he manipulated the chute to avoid those two obstacles. And he landed safely in Carmel Valley, which was on the old Oppenheimer Ranch, which is now the Santa Lucia Preserve. And the ranch hands, when they looked up, they saw an airplane, and they saw what they thought was a white balloon, and the airplane was circling around to shoot it down. That's what the ranch hands thought. And of course, they quickly realized that the guy had parachuted out, and when he landed, they went to his rescue, and they made sure that they called a Navy ambulance, and he then went into Monterey and into the Monterey Hospital for treatment. And so what happened to the airplane? Well, it kept circling and circling, and finally impacted the rugged Garza's Canyon, which for those who know where it is, it's a canyon not too far from Carmel Valley Village, very rugged. Little Garza's Creek flows down through the canyon, and it slid about several hundred yards down the canyon and hit a large rock. And at that time, the bomb and rockets exploded. And then, of course, there was nothing left of the airplane after that. The parts were scattered in a great area. And so the crash, The investigators after that noted that the fuel cells were intact, and therefore the actual explosion was caused by the ordnance, not by the gas tank. And so 4 of the 6 50 cal guns were found, and of course they were twisted beyond use at all. And since it was in such an area that the Army Air Force guys there said they couldn't possibly go and retrieve the wreckage, and so the ranch foreman of the Oppenheimer Ranch gave them permission to actually leave the wreckage there, where it still is today. And so the wreckage is there, just corroding away as we speak. And so this is a photograph of the Garzas Canyon, a little bit. The airplane crashed here, and of course exploded here. And the actual site of the crash here is about 2 miles from Carmel Valley Road area, and just actually not more than 2 or 2.5 miles from the History Center where I work, and in the village area. And so that's where the airplane still is interred. Now, through my historical writings of Carmel Valley history, I came to know a lady who actually donated one of her antique saddles to the History Center. And one day I was talking to her, and I mentioned, she asked what I was doing, and I said, well, actually, I'm writing about a crash that happened here a long time ago. And she says, yeah, I heard it. She was a young girl who was just walking back from her class in Tularcitos grade school in the village, and in her own words, she says, I heard the shrill of an airplane as if it were headed straight for the ground, then a terrifically loud bang. And I hurried home to tell my mother, but she said, well, somebody probably already knew about it. But when that loud bang occurred, the sheriff in the village and the original fire department people trekked up to Garzas Canyon to see the wreckage. And at that time, they didn't realize that the pilot had bailed out, and so they didn't find the pilot, obviously. And so this account was written by a lady named Vala Johnson, who now lives in Montana. And so there was a lot of souvenir hunters in the valley who were concerned about one thing only, and that's trying to get souvenirs. I knew one of the old timers who got one of the pistons from the old Merlin engine. And we had it, I put it in a case here, and we had it displayed at the History Center for probably all of 1925. And I measured the piston. It's 5.5 inches in diameter and weighed about 7 pounds. So it was big rotating machinery in that engine. Now, back to the pilot. I mentioned that it took me several years to talk to the old timers about the crash. I was unsuccessful on a lot of finding out really what happened. They were only interested in getting souvenirs, and of course, with my background, and of course all of you would appreciate, I was very concerned and determined what happened to the pilot. And so I was, at first I thought, since it was a Navy facility here, I thought it was a Navy airplane, but all of my research was dead-ended there. And And so the only real break I had was I found an article in a 1953 Monterey Peninsula Herald, which, remember, this is 1953, and Korean War. It was a little article, and they mentioned the airplane and the pilot's name, and then I had something to go on. And so I was able to find out where the Air Force had all their old accident investigation, which was at Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. And I actually had to pay for getting the accident report. And I thought, well, this is going to be easy from now on. But it's unbelievable how many accidents were going on in the Air Force in 1953. It took me a lot of time, but I was very determined, and I found the particular accident I was after. And so I got a hold of the report, which I still have, and it's 70 pages, and for those of you familiar with military operations, has a lot of boilerplate type investigation, but it's very thorough, very thorough. I was very impressed with what they did. And so at that time, the Army guys were bivouacked here in Carmel Valley Village. This is the original fire department in the village here, and so they had a lot of trucks and whatever to get, supposedly at that time, is to get the airplane out of the canyon, which they never did. And so Maxie himself, of course, got out of the hospital, and he was somewhat of a hero to the young children. You know, remember 1953, and they had him. They gave him gifts and everything, and they gave him a great send-off here from the community center in Carmel Valley Village, and off he went back to George Air Force Base Hospital. So one of the things, as an engineer, I was very concerned about what the Air Force did to actually prevent this type of accident from happening again. And of course, that's what we do in the commercial airplane business. And so getting back to the battery, it was too weak for takeoff, and so they recommended all of the crews, if you have a weak battery, don't dispatch, don't go on the mission. And that's kind of obvious. They recommended to use external power to start the engine to save the battery. And all of the wings were supposed to perform pre-flight inspections of the generator ground terminals. And so what happened in this case, how the generator failed, is it was a solderless, crimped connector, you know, that went onto the generator stud, and obviously it had some stress involved. For over hours of operation, it actually cracked and failed. And so my first thought there was, well then, fix it. Just take the stress out of the cable so it won't happen again. That never did to my estimation, and I think the reason is toward the end of the Korean War, you had the jets coming online, and they had a whole fleet of F-51s. I think they just opted to just inspect it. And so they also had training procedures on the correct use of bailouts with parachutes. So what happened to old Captain, or at that time First Lieutenant Maxey? He remained in the service, and he flew the F-series of airplanes. He retired at the rank of captain, in 1960, and after that was an instructor pilot. He flew for FedEx and was a corporate pilot for a time period, and then eventually retired from flying altogether. He had 4 children and several grandchildren from 2 marriages, so he had a fairly good life, and according to the stuff I read, he was very much involved in the community. And so what happened, the final chapter on old Maxie, he died in 2007 at the age of 88 in Texas, and he's interred at the Fort Sam Houston National Cemetery in San Antonio. So that is the story of the crash and the pilot, and it's kind of a quick review of that, but if there's any questions you might have, I'm happy to field them.
Did the generator have anything to do with the cooling failure of the engine? Or was that
Well, I think the generator on the electrical system powered the coolant valves, and without that power on the valves, the coolant, I guess the pressure in the system was such that it broke through the seals, and that's how it lost the coolant. That's what I would understand to have happened. Now, there's a little bit of a sequel here. I actually talked to Maxie's son. I was able to find him in Texas, and he was 3 years old when his dad bailed out, and his family actually never knew very much about that incident. And so I was able to send him the information I had, and of course the family was very grateful to actually know what happened to their dad there. So Gary, that's about the story. Yes, sir.
Was this one the largest artifact they've ever found, or did they find pieces of the wings and stuff there?
Well, there's been a lot of souvenir hunters. I've heard rumors that one of the 50 cals were salvaged from it, and I don't know how true this is, but the person supposedly made a mailbox out of it. A standing a mailbox. But this is just hearsay. But yeah, there's been at least a half a dozen people that I've talked to who've gone up there and got parts. But there aren't. I mean, this airplane was blown apart. So.
I know I've had cars at Standing many a time with friends, and I'm going to enjoy telling them this story. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I've got the lat long of the accident if you want it. So. Okay.
Thank you.
You're right. Thank you.
Jeff, thank you very much.